Okay, I believe, oh, still one more. Their audio is still connecting, it looks like. All right, a few more coming in. I gotta tell you, I'm pleased with having more than 2 or 3 people. All right. Okay. I think everyone, it looks like everyone's audio is connected, but possibly not Carol's. Carol, if you're able to hear me, I hope so. Feel free to type in the chat if you can. Do want to make sure that folks can hear. And for anyone who was still connecting when I said this last time, you're welcome to turn your camera on if you want to have more of a in-person style discussion. But it's absolutely not necessary if you're comfy at home and in your PJs and don't want to be seen. That's just fine. All right, I think everybody seems to be connected. Good to go. I'm going to get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Councilmember Kat Bruner James. I'm joined by a handful of staff members here, Kyle Paulette, Aaron Quattel, and Dan Antosik are all here. And then I also see 2 other council members, Greg Polica and Mayor Pro Tem Raylon Leaks-May are also here. They're here mainly as participants, and the staff are going to sort of help me field some of the information that we'll be talking about tonight. But I want to keep it fairly casual. This is, while I'm doing this in my capacity as a city council member, I'm also sort of here in my capacity as a resident who has lived here for, I think, 19 years now, coming up on 19 years. And for many of those years, I've been affected by stormwater and sometimes flooding, sometimes surface flooding, and sometimes even backups. So I hope that folks who've been affected by those kinds of things over the years will hopefully learn a bit, both from my experience and also from some of the information that'll be discussed by staff. And I don't think that we're going to take a whole hour necessarily, but when we get to a certain point where we've hit the highlights, I'm happy to field questions and have more of a conversation style discussion if folks are up for it. But, and excuse me for looking over at my other screen from time to time to look at the notes and the agenda. I want to start off by just talking about sort of an overview of how our system works. And I'm going to lean heavily on our Deputy DPW Director, Dan Antosik, to sort of fill in some of the more technical aspects of it. My understanding is a little bit rudimentary. But things that are important to know are that we have a combined system. So not far away from where your pipes or your service lines meet your home, the sewer and stormwater pipes combine, not all that far away. There's a portion of the lines that are on homeowner property that are part of the homeowner property, including the pipes, that homeowners have to maintain. And then there's a certain point where they reach the main line that then thus begins sort of the city's property and the city's obligation to maintain. And we're also connected to a wider system. We connect to a county system. So when we have issues, we often have to work with the county to sort of figure out those issues, find out the source, find out what can be done and how we can work together. So with that very rudimentary intro and understanding, Dan, why don't you fill in some of the gaps that I left there? And I know you've got a diagram that sets forth some of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I think you did a pretty good job off rip. I would say you're a little bit more than rudimentary. You've been learning quite a bit about this over the years. So good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Antosik, and as councilperson Bruno James said, I am DPW director, deputy director. And I'm just going to share my screen here for folks because I have a little presentation and some visuals to touch on when it comes to our sewer system. And as Kat said, our system is a combined system. So what does that really mean? That means that we have a system that is both designed for both sanitary and stormwater. So everything goes into the same pipes. What would be different if we didn't have a combined system is every time you flush your toilet, it goes into one pipe. Every time it rains, that water goes into another pipe. Well, here in Ferndale, the way the city was built out, they all go into the same system and eventually make their way to a water treatment plant. Wastewater treatment plant, I should say. So here in the city of Ferndale, we are 4 square miles, but we have 80 miles of sewer main. So we actually have more sewer main in the ground than we do our combined between water and sewer. There's more miles of mains than there are miles of road in the city. Our sewer system, everything that goes into our sewer system eventually makes its way to Oakland County's sewer system for our larger drainage district that we are a part of with our surrounding communities. So when it comes to stormwater, it truly is a regional deal because we're all flowing to the same place. Eventually, liquids and solids get separated, but they all make their way to the water treatment plant, which is operated by Great Lakes Water Authority, the same folks that we get our water from. So when it comes to responsibility, as Councilperson Bruno James touched on, there's two parties involved. That is the city and that is the property owner. But it's a little bit different than your water service line. So when it comes to that responsibility, the homeowner is responsible for their entire service line for the sewer. So from where that line goes out of the house all the way to where it connects to the sewer itself, the property owner is responsible for it. What the city is responsible for is the larger system of sewer main itself and our catch basins. Now,
did you go to the second slide yet,
Yeah, Dan, I was gonna say.
Because I think, yeah, there you go. That outlines what you're talking about better.
So I promise I was going to get to it, but
sorry.
So, and then the catch basins. So our catch basins, and when I refer to catch basins, I mean the sewer grates that you see in the curb. Those are what we refer to as catch basins, and that's where our stormwater goes. And then those all connect to our sewer main. So this diagram that you're seeing right here is the actual makeup here in the city of Ferndale under our ordinances. So the property owner is responsible for that sewer line all the way to our sewer main. And a lot of times we get phone calls at the DPW that may not be connected to street flooding. Well, I'm having a backup in my basement, and 9 times out of 10, our response is going to be, I have no one else in the area that's reporting this. This is likely an issue with your private service line. And 9 times out of 10, that's what's going on, because it's one of these underground things that are all over the city are things that we take for granted because we don't see them. You flush the toilet and they work. And it's when they're not working, when that issue comes about. And most residents really aren't aware of that, distinction of responsibility. And it's an important thing to know. So, this next slide kind of goes over where it all flows at the end of the day. So this is a snippet of our larger county sewer system that's in the city of Ferndale. And this is northeast Ferndale. I wasn't able to include the entire map because it would just be so small and distorted, but everything in the city of Ferndale eventually makes its way to Lenox and the service drive. And it all, at this point, these blue dashed lines that you see is county sewer that is operated by Oakland County Water Resources Commission. And everything flows into these sewers. Now, these are large sewers. These are 9-foot in diameter sewers, 7-foot in diameter sewers. So when it's rainy and people are doing laundry and using the restroom, they get quite full. But on a normal day, it's, more so business as usual with a light flow. But everything from the city of Ferndale eventually makes its way to the Coon drainage system, which is located at 12 Mile and 75 behind Home Depot. It's a giant multi-million gallon underground system where all of our larger drainage districts, water, stormwater, and wastewater go. So when I say that larger drainage district, it's, us down in Ferndale all the way up to Birmingham and our neighboring communities to either side of us. And then when it comes to the maintenance of the system, like I touched on a little bit earlier is, and we'll get to later on in this meeting, is the system maintenance. So, what does the city do? So the city has an annual program that we do where, internally at the DPW, we call it CIPP. Everyone's cool, more government acronyms. That's cured in place pipe. So what we do each year is we line sewers. So some of you may live on a street where we completely replace the sewer main. Well, or not sewer main, but water main, I should say. Well, sewer's a little bit different because we can actually line that. So what do? We clean and then we line, and think of the lining as you put a giant tube sock into the sewer, you heat it up with warm water, and it turns into a plastic liner within the sewer itself. So every year we're doing a few thousand linear feet of cleaning sewers and lining sewers. In addition to that, this truck that you see in the picture, this is our Vector truck. So this truck is used to help clean our sewers and pump out catch basins. And when I say pump out catch basins, there's a lot of debris that gets into the catch basins. That's dirt that's on the road, that's leaves, sticks, anything that may be left over and makes its way into the catch basin. We pump out so that we can maintain a good flow into that basin itself when it's raining. And then this truck is also used to clean and jet our sewer lines. And, what that means is this giant orange hose that's on the front of this truck is used to push a high pressure, think of it as like a sewer power washer, through the sewer. And we can also put an attachment onto it that is a circular, almost like a circular sewer saw that goes through and cuts any root infiltration or anything like that out of the sewers. So we're not getting into positions where There's blockages that's going to prevent good flow. In addition to, we treat all of our catch basins every year with West Nile virus mosquito tablets, because those can be a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So those get treated. And then one of the major things that really helps dictate that cleaning and sewer lining program that I spoke about earlier is our televising and assessment. That typically goes on every 4 to 5 years. So back in 2018, 2019, we televised and made assessments on, I want to say it's about 25% plus or minus of our sewer mains. So, we're driving a little rover into the sewer, not necessarily the city because of the scale that we do it on. So we do contract that out, and we're taking a camera through all of our sewer main. And that helps us identify troublesome areas that maybe they need a repair in the main itself, and which ones are potentially troublesome that we want to get lined sooner rather than later. So that major televising and assessment that we complete on a every 4 to 5 year basis helps us dictate our work in between that time frame. And when it comes to system maintenance, these are actual photos from video that I've taken. So you'll see right here, there's this is a snake that a plumber would use to come and clean out your sewer line that connects to our main. Well, this plumber decided that it would be best to leave their sewer snake in our sewer main. But the problem with this isn't going to cause the city much problem, but this is going to cause you as a homeowner issues, because we'll use debris that gets flushed down the toilet and all that fun stuff can get attached and help clog up your sewer lead. Now, we're able to do removals of this sewer snake that's caught in our main, but it can be a little bit pricey because our contractor sends a small robot down into the sewer that actually cuts this sewer snake out. And we'll let you know, like, hey, there's a sewer snake stuck in your lead. But after we've removed it from the city main, that's not our responsibility anymore because of that diagram that I showed you earlier. And then if you look below that snake, this is a photo of grease. So this is what grease does to a sewer. And that's why it's extremely important, even as a property owner, not to pour your fats, oils, and greases down your drain, because this is what it will build up to in your actual service line itself. So please don't do that. Put it in a container, save it for a rainy day. I call it bacon butter. It's good to help with the eggs if you're frying them. And then on the left of the screen here, these are roots that have grown into the sewer. And in both of these pictures, these are roots coming into the city's sewer main from private residential sewer leads. And you may be thinking like, wow, that's a lot. Like, yeah, these sewer lines coming into the sewer, our sewer main, are completely blocked full of roots. Now, water's still going to make its way down your sewer lead into the sewer main. But also what that wastewater coming out of your house is nutrient for these roots, and they will continue to grow. So, it's important to be aware that this is a thing that should potentially be addressed, and we'll go over this more in later on in the presentation, but this is a visual of what it looks like. And when we do our cleaning of the sewer main, we will go through and we'll cut this out, but that's going to continue to just grow right back into our sewer. Now,
you just cut the part that goes into the main, not
Yep.
up into the service line, right?
Correct. So we're not able to cut up into a sewer lead itself. We're just cutting right through the sewer main. And you see this a lot in some of our sewer mains that are located in the rear easements. So in Ferndale, for example, all of our water main is located at the front of the house. They're located pretty much along the curb line or in the street. Well, sewer main's a little bit different. Sewer main in Ferndale, there's a lot of it that's located in the street, but there's also a lot of it that's located in the rear easements. So in your backyard where there's a lot of trees and there's a lot of big trees. And these roots, you know, wherever they're going to grow, they're going to grow. And when they're finding those nutrients from your sewer lead, they're going to thrive there and become little bushy root balls in your sewer lead overall. So I think, yes, that is the extent of this portion of our system overview and actual maintenance that the city does for our sewer mains.
So this is a good segue though into some of the things that homeowners can do. I've had the type of backup that is suggested by some of the photos on that last slide before, where, you know, either tree roots have overrun my line, you know, or other obstructions. There are products available at hardware stores that are like these root killers that you can kind of flush down into your system. I can't really comment on the efficacy of those. I've used them before, but as a homeowner, what I would strongly suggest based on my experience is annually or at least every other year, having a plumber actually snake it or jet it. If you have trees that go relatively close to your line, or if you've experienced kind of small backups in your basement, regular line maintenance really mitigates that. I've lived in my house since I was a second year law student, and I'll tell you that those first couple of years we maintained nothing. We definitely had some backups as a result of that. Now that we've gotten on a more regular cleaning schedule, it's really improved those kinds of things. The other thing, I have sort of a silly video that I want to show you that sort of builds off of what Dan was talking about in being mindful of what you put into the system from your home. So avoiding flushing anything that's not actually flushable. And just because it says it's flushable doesn't mean it is flushable or that it should be flushed. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you this, this video that talks about what you should flush and what you should not. Oh, wait, I actually need to reshare it because I forgot to select the button so that you could hear the audio. Let me try that one more time. Got it this time. Okay. Let me get my cursor in the right place. All right, I figured we could use a 30-second kind of funny, cute video. Let me get back to my other screen here so I know what I'm talking about. Some other things to keep in mind are how you landscape, especially if, you know, around in the immediate vicinity of these lines. It's a good idea if you don't know where yours is, to find out. And Dan, maybe you can speak to, I didn't think to ask this ahead of time, whether or not DPW can assist in locating where your line comes out the back, or if you need to do the DIY version. It should be fairly clear in your basement sort of where the, I don't know the right term, but in your basement, you know where the backup is coming from, right? It's almost always going to be sort of a straight shot out. In my neighborhood, it's through the backyard, and I think in many it is a straight shot out from there. So if you have a sense of where that is in your basement and where that lines up in your yard, that's going to be a fairly big clue. But Dan, if people aren't sure where those lines are, what's a good resource to help them find it?
The best resource to help them find it is to give us a call at the DPW, because as these sewer lines were made, we have what we call sewer tap cards, and they can be good and bad, because these tap cards are from whenever your home was built. So if your home was built in the 1920s or the 1960s, the inspector at that time could have been heavy on detail or not very detail oriented. So the tap card could just say 250 feet northeast of manhole 34116. Well, what that says is we know where the manholes are at, and you literally have to measure 250 feet from that manhole, and that will be the location of your sewer tap.
Gotcha.
And they're different than water lines because a lot of them are made of clay. And when we do utility locating, our underground utility devices that we use to locate lines cannot detect clay crock. So
Gotcha.
you won't have the nice, pretty yellow or blue flags in your yard to show where your sewer's at, because we're not that detailed. We're not able to get that detailed because of the clay that was used in the piping. So, but anyone can give us a call at the DPW, and we can share that tap card with you as to the exact footage of where that line is. And like Councilperson Bruno James said, you're a straight shot. Your sewer line doesn't do jogs back and forth. It's got a nice gradual grade, so there's fall for that flow to go into our sewer.
So the reason why I think it's helpful to know where that line goes through your yard, because if you do any landscaping, especially tree planting, you want to be really mindful of that line. And while we want to have a very healthy, vibrant tree canopy, because that ultimately helps disperse rainfall, we don't want to be planting them right on top of our lines and getting root obstructions. And there are actually lots of landscaping strategies that can help mitigate stormwater. And the reason why I'm focusing so much on stormwater is that unless you have a blockage in your line, toilet flushing and wastewater is not usually the main problem with backups. I mean, it ends up being the grossest part of your backup and what you don't want in your basement. But unprecedented stormwater is what is really causing the major problems that we've had at an increasing rate over the years. So I want to talk about two different things related to stormwater. One, talk a little bit about newer construction standards, because I know anytime that we have some kind of a building coming into our neighborhoods, we get concerned about, if a property goes from a single family home, for example, to, an apartment with more than one toilet flushing. And I'm just using that as an example. Obviously, there are more sources of wastewater. People have questions about, isn't this going to be greater stress on our sewer and stormwater system? And the interesting thing is that, at its peak, Ferndale's population was right around 30,000 at some point in the 70s, whereas now we're around 20,000. So well below the peak, about 2/3 of the peak. So I'm gonna ask Erin Quaitel, our environmental sustainability director, to talk a little bit about one, infrastructure in new developments that helps sort of mitigate stress on the system, and also to talk about some landscaping strategies that homeowners can do to help improve permeable surfaces, help stormwater runoff go to where it needs to go. And then we can sort of talk about like rain gardens and rain barrels and some stuff like that. But Erin, why don't you jump in and start by talking about the construction standards, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna get into like the engineer standards per se, but in general, what I can say is that, so there's different types of storms that are qualified. So there a lot of times, especially in 2014, you heard a lot of talk about this being like a greater than 100-year storm event. And that's a term that's used commonly when you talk about stormwater, because it's like once in every 100 years, you will have an event with that amount of volume. Well, with climate change, we're seeing that those types of events are increasing. And so what we're looking at now in the GWK drainage district, which was mentioned earlier, which is where we are, is revising those standards to make sure that they're meeting the requirements that we're facing. And so when every development, and that's important to know because whenever development comes to us in the Community and Economic Development Department and it follows through, all of our processes and everything like that, it comes to the point where we're doing a site plan review. We always review that to make sure that it complies with the standards that we have, which are known as stormwater standards. And those stormwater standards are what the development is designed to. And that's based on the amount of impervious surface, meaning like concrete or the roof of the building or the building footprint or anything that water cannot penetrate. And engineers do a calculation for the runoff level. So if rain falls onto that surface, how fast, how quickly, how it moves, how that water gets into our sewer system. Our new developments are required to have stormwater mitigation, and most developers use underground detention systems. And what that means is it's a underground piping system that is basically like a giant storage tank or like several giant storage tanks underneath the footprint of either the building or the parking lot or a combination of thereof, which has an outlet connected to our combined system, but the outlet is very small. And so the design of that, it's kind of like if you have a really big drink, like the big gulp from, I think that's like Speedway or something like that, but you have a little tiny straw, which you're getting that liquid out of. Same idea. So you have this really large vessel underground that collects all of the stormwater, but the outlet is very, very small. And historically, like previous development didn't have that. So in a sense, when new development comes around, we're required to have these mitigation strategies for stormwater, and they have greater mitigation strategies than that were in the past. Something that you might hear often is green stormwater infrastructure or green infrastructure. And that's another method that developers and communities can utilize to help with stormwater mitigation, because especially in places like Ferndale, we are very impervious or have a lot of concrete and roads. We're very urbanized because we have a lot of development. We're very developed compared to places maybe like Northern Oakland County, which has a lot of green space or that sort of thing. And so it's really important for communities like Ferndale to think about their stormwater system as a whole. So development is part of that. You have this gray infrastructure or infrastructure that doesn't use plants or any sort of green material like you would think. And that is like a different strategy to mitigate stormwater. I will say that green stormwater infrastructure is really important in spaces where you would have a large development. It would take a lot of green infrastructure to mitigate the amount of runoff. And so a lot of times what we find is that the green infrastructure solutions are better at storm water quality versus quantity. The quantity is usually taken care of through those underground systems or large catch basins like we were talking about. Since we're a combined system, catch basins are elsewhere too, but it's like a gray infrastructure and infrastructure system to collect stormwater, and the green stormwater infrastructure practices are really for water quality. And like the smaller, more regular storms like we had you know, a few days ago or today, if you were in an area that had some rain like we had. So as far as capacity, a lot of the developments, actually all of the developments are required to have a stormwater mitigation strategy and system in place, which is greater than the system that we currently have from historically developed locations. And since we do a lot of redevelopment in Ferndale specifically, that redevelopment is actually better in a lot of ways as far as the stormwater mitigation strategies go. So that was a lot. And if you have questions or need any clarification about it, I can go into that. And I can pause here for that, or if you want me to then talk about, kind of like flip and talk about more green infrastructure and what you can do.
Yeah, let's try to plow through a little bit and see if we
Okay.
can end early and
Yep.
end with questions. But yeah,
Yep.
I would want to talk a little bit about things that homeowners can do if you have a big enough yard. Rain gardens are an option, and rain barrels as well.
Yep.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so unlike larger developments that I was just talking about, green stormwater infrastructure can actually be really beneficial for small sites or residential sites because you don't have a very large impervious surface compared to like your lot size, for example. And I know that's not true for everybody, but in general, your house takes up a certain amount, your driveway takes up a certain amount, and then you have your front yard, your backyard, that's space in between the sidewalk and the street. And that is areas that you could utilize this green stormwater infrastructure practice. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be something as fancy as a true rain garden, so to speak, because in Ferndale, we're really fortunate that Mayor Melanie Piana had pushed for an ordinance that's called the Planned Natural Landscape, where it allows our residents and businesses, whoever owns property in our community, to utilize landscaping materials other than turf grass, which is like the normal green lawns like every residential property may have. You may have seen like different types of planned natural landscape throughout Ferndale. And I want to stress that it's planned natural landscape and not just weeds, although all green space technically does have stormwater mitigation practices, but it's that planned natural landscape. So you're planning the location where it is. And so you may think like if you ever notice in your backyard, you have water that's ponding, or you notice that you have different depressions or like low spots in your yard, that would be the best place to have. You want to put these rain gardens or put these planned natural landscapes in areas where water is already collecting. Mm-hmm. One, that makes your plants live longer because then you're planting these specific plants that like water, and so they would like to live in an area that has a lot of water. And you're able to mitigate and kind of collect that water in those already like low areas. And so there's a lot of different lists online that you can look to. There's resources with the MSU extension resources to look at different like rain garden guides. There's been a lot of work if you are up on the stormwater lingo in the city of Detroit, actually, because they have what's called the stormwater utility fee. And so they have different strategies in place so that they encourage green stormwater infrastructure for properties to use. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can look at that. And the other cool thing about green stormwater, at least I think it's really cool about green stormwater infrastructure, is that you can utilize native plants, which also has all these co-benefits such as supporting our pollinators, being more hardy to the environment that we have here, and overall can kind of lend some unique character to your property if that's what you're interested in as far as landscaping. And the other thing I want to mention really quick about landscaping and plants and like things and strategies that you can do is that, to the point earlier about planting trees, is that we all know that trees have a lot of benefits, but we also know that not all trees can be planted and survive in certain areas. And so what we really started pushing in the city of Ferndale is that it's like the right tree in the right place. Perhaps planting a tree over top your sewer line is not the right place. And so knowing your property, knowing the different types of trees, we actually have a recommended tree list at the city of Ferndale that anybody is welcome to view. It's on our website, and I'm happy to share that with anybody who's interested. But it's really thinking about what types of trees would survive in lower Southeast Michigan, and then thinking about the placement of those trees on your property to make sure they're not negatively impacting even your home or any other structure that you might have on your property. So again, that was a lot. Happy to go in more depth, but that's the overview I have for that.
And if I could just piggyback off that, Aaron, one of the things you touched on with the green infrastructure is the quality versus quantity. So one of the things in Ferndale is our soil makeup. The west side of Ferndale is very sandy. The east side of Ferndale has a lot of clay. So on the west side, you have very good stormwater infiltration when it rains. The ground is just soaking that up, and if you live on the west side, chances are you don't have a soggy backyard. But if you live on the east side, where there's a lot of clay, you could have a soggy backyard when it rains for a few days. And just like Aaron touched on, with our larger developments, we're requiring stormwater detention. Well, as a homeowner, you can put a mini stormwater detention system underground in your backyard. And it's basically a small little drain that's in your backyard that water can drain into, instead of just, pooling in the backyard, soaking in to where, every time the dog comes in after it rains for a few days, you better be right at the door with the towel to wash those paws off before they get to running through the house. And, while that's going to take some resources, if you're really experiencing some significant ponding issues in your backyard, that may be something to look into. While it may be a bit tricky, if your sewer line goes out the back, it is something that as a property owner, you can do in the city of Ferndale. We're not going to tell you that you can't help mitigate the ponding or the flooding issues in your backyard. And it is something that can be effective. I was so fortunate enough to have a buddy that let me sleep on their couch during grad school, and they actually had a stormwater detention system in the backyard. And while, the ground would be kind of soggy after a few days, it really helped from having that water ponding in the backyard to where you really can't utilize it whatsoever until that eventually dissipates. So, that soil makeup is important when it comes to that stormwater infiltration and letting the ground and the natural plantings soak up that water.
So this has some logical flow to me to the next topic, which is surface flooding. I wanted to touch on this because I know for a fact that in my neighborhood over the years, I call them restrictor plates. I don't know if that's the right term anymore, but years ago, DPW basically when they would make it so that the stormwater grates where stormwater runoff from the alley would go into the system, originally would have a lot of holes in them. They would basically, plug up some of the holes so that the stormwater, runoff into the system itself would be slowed, because that would help prevent backups. And the reason that I want to touch on this, because in some neighborhoods, not all, that may be very intentional and strategic. And so while it can be inconveniencing and frustrating and seem odd to have some surface flooding, sometimes that's in place to offset the flooding that could end up in your basement. Now, that doesn't mean that anytime that you see surface flooding, that's exactly what's going on. There may be other issues of debris clogging a grate, and you may want to go over and take a look and see if that needs to be cleared from debris. Sometimes it takes neighbors pitching in and spotting that kind of thing. But Dan, do you want to touch on that with a little bit more expertise than what I just said?
Yes, absolutely. And restrictor plates is the correct terminology. So you have done your homework, Councilperson Bruner James. So let me share my screen again. Where did my PowerPoint go? Give me hold with me. Can we see it?
Yep.
Okay, so get back where I needed to be. Here we go. So street flooding. Most people are not a fan of their street being flooded. I would beg to differ with you on that one. And like Councilperson Bruner James touched on, sometimes that street flooding is because there's debris covering the catch basin. Now, we will come and clean that debris off so we can get water start to flowing again. But if you're feeling froggy and you got some nice rain boots and a nice rain jacket and a rake is what I would always recommend. A sturdy metal rake, you can scrape that grate off and that water will begin to flow again. The one thing I will say is look both ways for cars, because they do not care when they're driving down the road that they're going to splash you with water. It is a reality. So just be aware if you do want to take that route. But one of the things we do is we want to purposely flood a street. So if you're looking at this picture in this presentation, on the bottom of it, this is what a restrictor cap looks like for a catch basin. So you see there's only 6 inlets for water to get in. And that's because we're restricting the flow that can go into that catch basin itself. And it's going to almost purposely flood the street. Now, a normal catch basin, this entire utility cover would be covered in these holes to allow maximum flow to get in here. And in this picture, what you're seeing is couple of our crew members fixing a lead for catch basin. So from time to time, we have to repair these. So sometimes if your sewers, that catch basin, it's a good catch basin, it's not flowing properly, we have to make a repair on it. And, we don't really know that until we put a camera down, see what's going on. But sometimes that can be a thing. So if you live on a block that always has this troublesome catch basin that never wants to flow freely, it's not restricted like the one you see here, please let us know, because that signals to us that let's pump this catch basin out and let's jet this line for this catch basin so we get some good flow. And the one thing to keep in mind is that our sewer system, and Aaron touched on this, was designed for a certain year storm. So when our system was built out 100 years ago, at that time, it was designed for a 10-year storm. And the difficult thing is, and staff has been looking into how we can best mitigate significant storm events with climate change, but we can't always protect against those 100-year storms. But if, we're intentionally flooding streets, we're keeping up with our sewer cleaning and maintenance, we can get maximum flow into the sewer system itself. And one of the things that, I would recommend to folks is, Councilperson Bruno James touched on earlier was a July storm event that caused a basement backup at the house. And that was a significant storm event. We had, I believe it was 2 inches of rain that fell within a couple hour time period. Our system's not designed for that. And just like their house had a basement backup, we saw basement backups elsewhere in the city of Ferndale. Well, reporting those issues on SeeClickFix, or at least calling and notifying us to that, allows us to look at where these are happening. So is this a potentially problem sewer that we have to take a look at that could need lining or has roots growing into it, like you saw, and not just in one joint, but throughout that sewer main? Or is this something that is directly connected to our county drain? Because one of the things with our system and our area that we're all interconnected into is when we have a significant storm event, there's only one real place that all this flow can go to, and that's that drainage district behind Home Depot at 12 and 75. So once that water has no place to go, it just keeps pushing backwards. So, for example, we have this county drain that runs throughout the city of Ferndale. And during that significant rainfall event in 2014, which many of you may recall, the pressure in the county sewer drains, which are 7-8 feet in diameter, that pressure, that back pressure from the water was literally pushing utility covers into the air. And I'm not talking, just pops them up and moves them. It was pushing those utility covers up 4, 5, 6 feet into the air because that pressure in that system had no place to go. So it's important that if you're seeing these issues going on in your neighborhood, if you want to be a good citizen and do us a quick favor and hit the rake on top of the catch basin and see if that allows the flow to go. If that does the trick, hey, we appreciate it. If it doesn't, let us know, because that could mean that there's some maintenance required to that catch basin. And with that maintenance, unfortunately, with the size crew that we have at the DPW and the resources that we have, we're not able to clean every single catch basin in the city of Ferndale every year. So we make it through different sections of the city, but you could be alerting us to a problem one that needs addressing. So, give us a call, report it on SeeClickFix, something like that, to make us aware of a problem before it becomes a bigger problem. We would really appreciate that. And, that's really what I have in terms of flooding the street. So while it may not be the greatest to get to your vehicle to leave, there is benefits of intentional street flooding. And I will say here in Southeast Michigan, in our surrounding communities, we are not the only ones that intentionally flood streets. You're going to see that in Royal Oak, in Clawson, in Oak Park, Madison Heights, and so on. And that's just a way for us to help mitigate basement backups.
So I just want to jump in really quickly and say, if you've never heard of SeeClickFix, if you're not familiar with that, there's both a free app that you can download on a smartphone, or on any computer. You can go to SeeClickFix, I think it's .com, and log in and alert, yeah, it is .com, alert the city to an issue. And I do highly recommend, of course, you may call DPW, that's the traditional way of notifying them. But I do encourage using C-Click Fix because it helps capture the data in such a way that I think helps spot, clusters of issues, and potentially get on top of long-term issues and solutions. And then the last thing I want to say, and then I do want to be able to field some questions, is that I talked to our state rep, Regina Weiss, this week. And, while we can't, afford to replace and upgrade every sewer main in the city, we are, doing the cured in place pipe and cleaning and jetting and so forth. But there may be some hope on the horizon for additional improvements. The governor's budget recommendation includes $290 million for the My Clean Water Plan, and specifically $235 million for preventing sewer overflows and for green infrastructures. Those would go out to cities in the form of local grants. Now, this is a recommendation. It has not been adopted by the legislature yet, but she feels fairly optimistic that a good chunk of this, the number might change, but that something along these lines will get adopted by the legislature this year. And I'm also going to reach out to Andy Levin following my discussion with Representative Weiss, because it's her understanding that there's some federal infrastructure projects that may also provide funding for local upgrades. So that's all the content I have. We've got 1 minute to spare. Just kidding. Sorry, we can stay for a few extra minutes to field questions. It did end up being a lot more dense than I anticipated. This is weird content, and I appreciate everyone being here, because if this has affected you personally, you know how important and complicated it is. So I know, who was it that asked if they were going to be able to ask a question? Is she still here? Was it Janet?
Janet.
Do you want to jump in with your question? Did she get kicked off or have to go?
Yeah, it doesn't look like Janet's still on, but it looks like someone
Nuts.
has their hand raised.
Okay. You can just, hey, Samantha. Samantha's my next door neighbor. Hello. I know that you've had these issues too, so jump in.
Yeah, it's actually Samantha and Derek, my husband.
Hey
Oh,
guys.
hey, Derek.
Thank you for having us today.
Yeah. I've got a question. So the issue that we've seen in the past is a surge to the system where we get water backing up into our basement.
Mhm.
Not as concerned about like flooding in the street or the yard or even flooding through the walls or something like that. It's what's coming up through the drain. And
yeah, you guys got hit really hard last July, right?
yeah, like it's a couple times a year. And last year, like we had 12 inches of water in our basement both times. So we scope our line out to the main every year. And also both times that it happened last year, we weren't at home. So I don't think that it's like a stress from, leaving the shower on, running the toilet, all that stuff. It's coming up from the main into the home. I'm wondering, in other communities, are there any systems like infrastructure that absorb those types of surges? And I'm not talking about planting trees. Like, are there devices like basins or I don't know what? And are those an option? Because it seems like just by the attendance here that there's a problem. I am happy to hear that there's codes and enforcements for new buildings, but I think that there's a problem with what we currently have.
Yeah, there are certain communities, and I don't know them offhand, have like regional stormwater mitigation systems. Kind of like I was describing earlier, how developments can have these large underground systems, is they would There's been some communities that have been using more of like a regional control system, so to speak. I do not know if any of those are actually in Michigan, but that is something that I've been thinking about, especially for the area in which you both live, because there's a lot of reports that we've had. During our vulnerability assessment of the stormwater system, we did note certain areas in our community that experience flooding more frequently. One of the things that we were trying to decipher is whether or not it had something to do, there's a lot of different factors, right? When the house was built, what the soils are, you know, what area of the system it's located. And so I can see some strategies or recommendations such as this being part of our climate action planning process that's coming up, that's going to be kicked off here in the beginning of the summertime. But in short, yes, I've seen that in other communities, and I can do a little more digging to see if there's any Michigan examples, but I don't believe that I've seen anything like that here in the state.
And, you know, if I could just jump in, with your area being a troublesome area, we did take a deeper dive and look into that following the storm event that we had in July. And we identified a potential solution that could help with the storm surge that you see over there. And we'll be working to, actually tomorrow morning, we will be doing some work to basically convert over a section of where your sewer comes into a larger sewer and create an overflow into another sewer, if that makes any sense to anyone. But we're hoping that that can help relieve some of that back pressure that comes during these storm events, in addition to finishing up a lining of a section of sewer that is downstream from your property sometime later on in the spring once we get to it. And we're hoping that that can help alleviate some issues versus having to completely rip up the entire alley in between Vester and Breckenridge and place a new larger sewer to accommodate for that. Because one of the tough things in like your area, for example, is there is a lot of impervious surface area. You know, you don't have green space, you have a concrete alley. Your lots are small, your lots are packed with houses, with garages, with concrete slabs when you look at it in an aerial view. So, you know, we're really hoping, and we think that this, what it may seem as a simple fix, might be able to do the trick for that problemsome area that has been going on here in the city of Ferndale.
And Kate Baker typed in the chat that she had a similar question about backflow preventers and if those were worthwhile. Was there anything that you wanted to add, or was that your main question?
Yeah, we got our sewer line fixed. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I think your neighbor was still going. Kat.
Just saying thanks.
Sorry, it's hard with the video not on. I'm dog sitting and there's a very rambunctious puppy out here. So on my porch with me. We got our sewer lined because we knew we had a crack and we knew we had root problems, and thankfully we are on the west side, sort of near Pinecrest, so really toward one of the higher points in the city. So we haven't had a lot of backups yet that weren't caused by our own issue, right? But when we were trying to decide whether we should get the sewer lined or replaced or what we should do, someone mentioned the idea of a backflow preventer. So something that would allow water to go out to the main, but not have, you know, during a storm event, things come back up into the house. And I'm just, it sounded like something we didn't need at the time. You know, we're going to be here for the foreseeable future. Is that something we should consider? Are those things legit? Are they, is that, you know, someone trying to sell me snake oil? Like, I'm not sure what that even is.
I mean, I can tell you anecdotally about my experience with it. In 2015 or 16, we spent the money to have a sump pump installed because we didn't have one previously, and a backflow preventer. It was extremely expensive, but I never slept when it rained after August 2014. So, and I needed to sleep. So we did it. And there have been times since then where I know that folks in my neighborhood who don't have those had backups, and we haven't. The one exception since we had ours installed was last July, where the pressure was so much that you have to have like a capped spot so that you can still get to your line to clean it. And the pressure was so much that it popped the cap right off. And we ended up having a backup.
Yeah, that's what
So
I was
they're
gonna
not
mention.
perfect. They're not perfect. And probably the more people who get them, the more pressure there is. I don't know. I'm guessing. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's, you know, they are effective to a certain point, to the council member's point. It depends on the system, the surrounding system. It depends on the severity of the storm. You know, there's, unfortunately, some storms are now not as predictable as maybe they were historically due to climate change. And that's why I was going to type into the chat to respond to Kate's question, but that's why it's really important for us to consider resiliency, adaptation, and mitigation strategies when thinking about our stormwater system. Part of it is improving the stormwater standards, like I had mentioned earlier, for development and redevelopment, and also doing all the preventative measures that Dan was talking about, as far as making sure we're up on our preventative maintenance, lining our sewers. And at some point, we're going to need to consider what the capacity of our system, is the capacity of our system adequate for the severity of storms that we continue to experience. And my hope is that through, like I had mentioned, the climate action plan, that some of those strategies can be put together as goals and action items to then continue to look at for our community. And one last note of that too is that it just kind of depends on the regional scale too. That we're talking about the GWK drain, so it may be beneficial for more of those smaller storms that maybe you had some previous flooding from, but some of the larger storms that are a little bit unpredictable and that are more severe, it may not be a beneficial tool.
Yeah, and with those, there's a maintenance portion of those because it's a mechanical flapper device. And if you're not keeping up on your preventative maintenance, they may not work properly. And then the other component of that is if there's a significant storm event going on, you do not want to flush your toilet, take a shower, use your washing machine, because if you open up that flap and you have a lot of back pressure, that flap is not able to close. So water will continue up your sewer line and eventually create a backup until that pressure is able to recede somewhat. But, you know, they're not a bad thing if you have the resources in which to do so. But just keep in mind that there's other things to think about. Like, you know what? It's been raining quite hard for a short period of time. So maybe I'm not going to do a load of laundry right now. And making sure that, you know, once a year you're checking and making sure it's working properly, if that's a route that you do want to go.
Good question, Kate. And feel free if anyone else has questions and wants to just take yourself off mute, you're welcome to jump in. All right, I think the questions have slowed down. I feel really badly that that Janet had to leave us. If anyone happens to know her, feel free to pass her my email address, which I'm going to type in the chat right now. I'm happy to help follow up with folks. try to get answers to more questions, brainstorm, strategize. You know, this is an important topic without a really easy fix. There are things that homeowners can do to help mitigate and help prevent in the future. There are things that the city's working on to do that. Major upgrades, like what Derek and Samantha were talking about, the possibility of some kind of an overflow basin or something. You know, those are the kinds of things that, you know, we would need some significant assistance from the state or the federal government to help upgrade this aging infrastructure. So to the extent that that you're comfortable, or if you're one of those folks who calls your legislators anyway, then do that and bring this up when you can. Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May, did you want to chime in on something?
No.
Oh, okay. And I did also want to add that I kind of gave a shout out at the beginning of the program to some of the other council members here, and Council Member Mikulski has joined us since I did that. So I just wanted to recognize her as well. And thanks everyone who stuck through this program. It's being recorded. I'm not sure how or where we're gonna push it out yet, but hopefully if you found it valuable, we can put it up somewhere so that you can share it with your neighbors who are interested. All right, thank you. Oh, and one more thing I just want to mention. So I wanted to do these sort of community conversations starting last year. My very first one was going to be on marijuana, and got canceled right at the last minute because it was in early March, and COVID changed everything and ruined all of our plans and threw us off track. But you know, now that we've gotten through that year and adjusted to the new normal, I'm planning to do a few more of these throughout the year. It's a lot to ask of staff to spend another evening, so I'm not going to do it you know, all the time, but I'm thinking like quarterly seems reasonable to come up with a topic, get some information together, field some questions, and find out what's on people's mind. So, so look forward to a few more. All right. Nice to see everyone. Thank you for coming, and I'll see you at some point in the future.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat.